I think we got to focus on the rest of the world tonight, and tonight we shall. Tonight, I said it twice. I feel like I'm on the musical. What's Side Story? Tonight. Lieutenant General Reginald Centracchio tonight. But serious conversation about a bunch of things: Ukraine, China, Nigeria, and this VA investigation, which has got a lot of people unnerved in the world and America today. So we'll get to all that, but first let's go to the rundown and see what's going on here. I can't believe this. Geez, oh my goodness, another speaker was involved in the Curt Schilling episode, huh? Tim White with some great work there. That cannot be, okay? I'll explain. Gee, we got some assertions that in the Republican primary there's some phony numbers being thrown around, but the person who says the phony numbers are phony numbers ain't coming clean, it seems. I'll explain that to you. And, you know, it's tough, this story about athletes who now are so sorry that they took all those meds to be able to stay on the field, and now they're suing. And, you know, I feel like suing the National Football League myself, to be honest with you. People who go to the Super Bowl want to go to warm weather, Commissioner. Hello, McFly. Let's dig in. Yes. And so it begins. It goes back farther. It goes back farther. 38 studios. I wanted to put up this graphic from a package that we ran last night just to remind you that Governor Carcieri has some interesting answers that he's going to have to give on this 38 studios thing. This is an affidavit. I understood, he says, that the proceeds of the EDC loan authorized by the resolution, together with the cash available, that's the key, or to become available to 38 studios, as set forth in the financial projections, would be sufficient to fund the project. Understand, well, I don't think that Governor Carcieri has a nefarious bone in his body. However, he was sloppy. He was doing some, I think he was doing some deal making, you know, legacy stuff, like he once saw those windmills in the ocean, deep water, and these guys end up getting the 38 studio deal, the house guys who maybe were profiting from this whole thing, my speculation. But Governor Carcieri, former Governor Carcieri, has got to come to the table at some juncture in some forum that gets established by some credible source to answer some questions here. Everybody's got a lawyer. I don't know if Don does, but it seems like he might. Everybody does. Nobody's coming to the House Oversight Committee to answer any questions, and I'm waiting for the subpoenas to get issued because the chairperson said that the speaker promised. That would be the new speaker. But before we get to the new speaker, let's get to the old speaker. Tim White nailed another one.
We've confirmed then Speaker William Murphy was given a tour of 38 Studios' Massachusetts headquarters in 2009. This new detail changes everything about when we thought 38 Studios first made contact with a Rhode Island politician. Until now, the first time a Rhode Island official met with anyone from 38 Studios was believed to be at Curt Schilling's house in March 2010 at a now famous fundraiser where the former Red Sox star first discussed moving his company to Rhode Island with former Governor Don Carcieri. But Target 12 has confirmed months before another top Rhode Island politician met with Schilling about 38 Studios, former House Speaker William Murphy. Reached by phone on Tuesday, Murphy told Target 12, "I went up in 2009 to meet with Curt Schilling and see what 38 Studios was about." Murphy says Schilling gave him a personal tour of the 38 Studios headquarters in Maynard, Massachusetts, but he says the meeting had nothing to do with moving the video game company to Rhode Island. He says, "I was asked if I would set up an introduction with Curt Schilling and the Speaker of the House in Massachusetts." Murphy says he doesn't remember who set up the meeting between him and Curt Schilling, only that it was a representative from 38 Studios. Murphy says he met Schilling again soon after, this time at the Massachusetts State House when he introduced Schilling to House Speaker Robert DeLeo. Shortly thereafter, in February 2010, Murphy stepped down and handed off the Speaker's gavel to Gordon Fox. Within 6 months, Rhode Island leaders approved a $75 million taxpayer-backed loan to 38 Studios. Murphy tells me he also attended that famous fundraiser at Schilling's home with Carcieri, but again, he says he was not involved in any discussions about the company's plans to move to Providence. With the Target 12 investigators, Tim White, Eyewitness News.
My question, my opinioned question. Tim, did he have his fingers crossed when he told you that? Come on, will you please stop it? I mean, for crying out loud. First of all, are you telling me that Curt Schilling, Red Sox hero, Bloody Sock, World Series, had trouble getting a meeting with the Massachusetts House Speaker? I don't care what the political issues were between them, Republican and Democrat. Are you kidding me? And Billy doesn't remember who actually could put him together with a star? You know, Tim, great work. Tim can only report what the speaker says. I get to opine. You know what I say? Baloney. Put Bill Murphy on the list of people we need to hear from formally and under oath. And finally, on 38 Studios, Nick Mattiello is in New York, actually on his way back, probably back home right now, having gone down to see the ratings agencies who are going to tell us about all the big bad things that are going to happen to us when we don't pay the bonds, the debt to the bondholders, $75 million plus. It's a fluid saga. It's getting multi-tentacled to the point where I can't even keep track. I don't know how you do. Next item. No. The Journal headline here, this 195 redevelopment proposal, you know, they moved the whole highway and there's a bunch of acres down there in a really pristine area to be for the city of Providence. This whole thing is ridiculous. They've only gotten 3 legitimate, maybe 2.5 legitimate responses here. Here's the map. This, you know where it is. Everybody knows where it is. This is the other side of the bridge that's been opened up since we moved the highway. There's all sorts of redevelopment wanting here from the 195 Commission, but they got to change their pattern of doing business here. They got to offer some tax incentives and kind of a tax-free zone or something like that. Because when I read today that the lead proposal is from the Carpianato Group, seems like an okay business. Johnston, Cranston, they've got some projects there, pretty substantial. They want $170,000 in office and lab space. I'm moving fast here. 170,000 square feet of office space, 175,000 square feet of residential space, 85,000 square feet of hotel, and another 180,000 of retail. Okay, but they want to call it the Connection at College Hill. We don't need any references to connections in Providence. Okay, what is this, a Goodfellas movie? The Connection at College Hill. Guys, rename your project, number 1. Number 2, rebid this whole thing out. Change the process, change the specs. Change it all. The Connection at College Hill. Cripes. Can I say that on TV? I just did. Next item. Okay, so here's a saga, political saga. I gotta hurry up through this one, but this is incredible. Okay, here's the headline. Go Local Prov. Ken Block leads in his own poll against Alan Fung. Right? Here's the data that he showed me on the television program this week. He's flipped the race, he says, from October to April, where he was losing by 28 points. Now he's winning by 9. Here's what he said on the TV show. Last night? Was it last night? 2 nights ago? This week.
We have a crisis in this state. We have an economic crisis. Someone coming up with solutions like I am, trying to solve the problems of the state and move it ahead. The message is working. The trend is good right now. We're going to stay on message. We're going to keep doing the thing that we're doing. And we will work very, very hard as we move through the rest of this campaign.
Well, I asked Alan Fung about this because Block was on the radio with me yesterday. I asked Alan Fung's campaign to respond because that's what responsible people on the air do. He didn't, but he ran to the Buddy Cianci program and he poo-pooed all of the numbers.
I'm completely confident that his poll numbers are as unreliable as his credentials to run as a Republican. Because
okay.
Right now, when you take a look what's going on, Rhode Island Republicans are enthusiastically supporting my candidacy along with their wallets and their endorsements.
Hey, easy to say. Ellen, I got a question for you. Why are the poll numbers unreliable? By the way, were they unreliable when you were winning by 28 points in October? Buddy Cianci asked him, by the way, do you have any recent numbers?
You done any internal polling?
I haven't recently, but I can tell you that the last poll that we did shows that once the Republicans learn about his Obama stuff, the Obamacare,
Okay.
it's deadly to him.
You haven't done any internal polling? Are you
Recent.
Geez, you know what? That's not what your campaign has asserted, more or less, to Go Local Prov, that you've got internal polling numbers. And secondly, I'm getting calls on the radio from people who say, well, we got calls in early May from somebody asking about a Republican primary. Well, Block's poll was done in April. Alan, got a seat right here, buddy. Come answer the question. What's unreliable about the numbers, and what's the truth about what your polling data says? And don't be running other places for safe harbor. In other news, sports. This is a tough one. The New York Daily News says, yeah, you figured this was going to come. Football players are saying, I got loaded up with drugs and now I'm sorry and someone's got to pay for it.
8 players are named in the lawsuit, including former San Francisco 49er Jeremy Newberry. It's almost like a cattle call where you'd have 20 to 25 guys standing with your pants half down, waiting in line for a doctor that's got 100, different syringes lined up, and you're walking through, they're sticking you one at a time as you walk in and out.
Bears quarterback Jim McMahon is one of the plaintiffs, claiming he discovered nearly a decade later he suffered a broken neck team doctors never told him about. His former teammate Richard Dent is also suing, stating he received medication to get him on the field and needed downers to sleep.
This is hard. Personal responsibility of players, the teams back in the day, even today, profit, and all of that. It's going to be an interesting case. Here's the thing, fellas. My guess is when you wanted to play, you wanted the drugs. And if it was today, you'd still want the drugs. It's a bigger systemic issue. And finally, I don't have time to elaborate on this. Minnesota, really? Come on, Commissioner. That ain't no vacation. I don't care how many bobsleds you put down the road outside the stadium. When we come back, the general. Too much to talk about. Stay with us. All right, welcome back in. It's Ukraine, it's Nigeria, it's China, it's all mixed in, and I've been itching to talk to the general about some of the stuff. Here's the latest spokesing from the Pentagon on what's happening with Ukraine.
We've seen them say this before. Well, we're going to withdraw, we're going to move, and we've seen very small unit movements, to and from the border area back to these forward bases that they have established in recent weeks. But President Putin said he's ordered them back to their home bases, which to us means a wholesale withdrawal of all the forces that are arrayed on the Ukrainian border. We've not seen that yet.
Retired Lieutenant General Reginald Centracchio, no stranger, Eyewitness News and the like. Good to see you, sir.
Good to be here.
Just, you tell me, what do you make of this whole thing?
It's deja vu. We saw this happen back in the 60s. We saw it happen with the demise of the Second World War and the creation of all these countries that eventually became the Soviet Union. And then in 1990s, thereabouts, we saw the dismemberment, if you will, of the Soviet Union. So we're right back to where we were before World War II to some extent. The uncertainty is of what's going to happen from this point on, because it's a different time totally, ranging from ground armies and large armies to the technology we have to deal with today. And I think part of our conversation will have to do with the cybersecurity and the security of that. But as far as Ukraine is concerned, what we're witnessing here is, I think, an attempt to resurrect the Soviet Union to some extent. When you talk about a democratic process in the Ukraine, that's a different philosophy than what we understand democracy to be. When we talk about democracy, we think we go to the polls, we elect people to represent us, and hopefully sometimes they do what we think they should be doing. Their idea of democracy means that you're going to vote the way we think you should vote, or else we're going to do bad things to you.
It's hard
and
for
that's
people,
exactly what we're
it's
seeing.
hard for people to figure out who the good guys and the bad guys are in Ukraine. The Crimean exercise was phony.
Absolutely.
The idea that Putin is playing around on the border north is strange, because he says I'm out and they're not. I mean, the satellites don't lie, right? So the Obama administration reaction to this, you bullish on it? Yes, no?
We have, I don't want to get political here, but I feel I have
strategy
to say
is,
exactly what we have we're in this game. We're in a chess game, and we're bringing to that game a bunch of checkers. We have a policy that's non-existent, no matter what we've done or said over the last several years as it relates to red lines. If you do this, we're going to do this, sanctions, and so on and so forth. None of that has any.
You feel like
consequence.
we're getting pushed around a little bit?
Absolutely, and I think there's an end state to this. It's not a very pleasant one, as I see it. The unpleasantry means that we will eventually become a non-entity as it relates to the whole world's economic well-being. If Ukraine is a good example of what's happening, eventually you will see that blossom out into a better relationship between China and Russia. Russia now has all of the chess pieces in this chess game we're playing, in the form of resources, how it distributes those resources, how it charges different places for the resources, and specifically in the case of the Ukraine. Russia, Putin specifically, is charging more for natural resources in the form of natural gas than he is anybody else. A major concern to the sanctions that we've seen attempted will hurt Germany and Europe as well as the Ukraine before it even touches the United States, but it will before it touches Russia.
And us whacking the hierarchy of the Russian, big money guys doesn't seem to be doing a dime.
None whatsoever. I think
Putin doesn't seem to either be bothered by it or they got some money bags sitting in a
think so.
pillow
It's
somewhere.
of no consequence that I can see. It hasn't shown any significance or any result in what we're saying we're going to do.
Speaking of China, let me just run this little piece here about our worries about the cyber stuff here.
For the first time, we are exposing the faces and names behind the keyboards in Shanghai used to steal from American businesses.
From this building in Shanghai, prosecutors say the members of 61398 stole corporate secrets, product specs, and private memos from 5 U.S. companies.
The hackers stole trade secret designs for components of those plants. To be clear, this conduct is criminal.
And maybe warlike, in a sense.
You're right. You've probably heard me talk about my concerns on Channel 12 from time to time. If we had a nuclear weapon go off in the United States, it would be horrendous. Chemical warfare, biological, terrible. Dirty bomb, terrible. My major concern has always been and will continue to be cyber terrorism. You may have remembered back to 1974 and thereabouts when we lost our ability to even control who was getting gas at the pumps, and we were killing each other over that. If you can, in fact, affect the well-being, financial well-being of the United States, you don't have to have a shot fired anywhere. We will implode. And that's exactly where we are vulnerable. The cybersecurity systems we have in place are woefully ill. If you look at just what happened with China, they have some high-level officials who hacked into our communities.
Well, at least we identified them, right? I mean, there's a little bit of nibbling going on in terms of protection. I mean, a Justice Department action against them, I'm sure it's just the tip of the iceberg.
It is. But at the same time, so what? If we say it's a crime, who's going to enforce it, and what are we going to do about it?
It's frustrating.
So it is, and I think when we say things like that, we would have the wherewithal to be able to deliver on what we say.
Nigeria, this much of a puzzle. Next.
He calls himself Saleh Abubakar and was initially very agitated.
How long did you plan this abduction for? How long was the operation in the planning stages?
3 months. He claims to have seen the abducted girls 3 weeks ago and says they are fine.
We heard that some of them are sick and require medical attention.
No, it's lie. They don't have problem at all.
He refused to say whether the girls had been moved across the border and claimed they would no longer be sold as slaves because they had all converted willingly to Islam.
What do we do with this?
We need to understand that this is going to happen more and more as the next several decades are concerned. This is terrorism at its best because we don't have a defense against it. What happens? Right. What happens in that particular country, we have no ability to be able to control that, except we have a value on human life. That's the only thing we have. But to enforce that, how do you do it? Initially, there was no reason for them doing this. 200 or 300 girls were taken with no reason. But most recently, he identified, well, we'll give them back to you if you release some of our prisoners. Well, that's terrorism, no matter which way you cut it. The problem is, there's nothing we can do about it.
When we say there's no
action.
Right. So, and when we promise the Secretary of Defense says there's no boots on the ground plan here, I don't know whether to take that on face value or not. But it seems to me that when we just eliminate any option that really we have, which is force, we're left helpless.
If you recall back in the late 60s, that same term was used, no boots on the ground. And we started to give advisors, and we started to give technology that was available at the time. And all of a sudden, first troops started to go in. I'm concerned that when you talk about no boots on the ground, eventually any military option will involve ground troops to have to sustain.
You don't think here, though, do you?
Not here, no, I don't. I think we'll be able to handle this with, hopefully, with some kind of a discussion understanding that.
But the Nigerians might have to trade prisoners for girls. America would never do it.
That's correct.
We'll let them do it.
That's correct.
We'd never do it.
That's right, because we talk about you can never ever negotiate with a terrorist, and if we did, then all is lost.
Tell me what you think about what's happening with the VA. I don't think I have time to run the president right now. I just want to hear what the general has to say about this investigation. My gosh, why do we have so much difficulty in doing well by our America's bravest? All of this history is just ridiculous.
Let me take a quote and I'll paraphrase it. In 1781, George Washington said something like, "Unless you take care of our soldiers, you can't possibly expect to raise future armies to defend our freedom." That all by itself should send a message. Unfortunately, it doesn't. Each and every year, we look at the same problem of funding the VA across the nation, and each and every year we look at leadership problems within the VA and other agencies across the nation. This particular scenario, as it relates to most VA hospitals, outside of Rhode Island, I got to put that plug in. Providence VA is outstanding.
And my father-in-law is being treated in Vermont and says, I've never had a problem. So it's a spotty problem across the
Absolutely,
country.
and it has to do with leadership in those particular facilities. So if that is the case, they need to identify it, replace those individuals, and fund them properly. Short of that, nothing's going to work. And they need to stop taking money out of the VA system and putting it in social programs.
Well, it's a two-tiered issue. It's about our military primarily and taking care of our veterans for the rest of their lives the right way. It's also an indication about how big a healthcare bureaucracy can get and how inefficient it can be, a la Obamacare.
You're right,
in the
but
future.
if it operated the way it's supposed to with the VA, we wouldn't have a tremendous problem. As an example, in Providence, they have a very little backlog, if any, primarily in primary care. The rest of it is
Unfortunately, I got to
really good.
Come back again.
I will.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Of course, you can see the General on Eyewitness News. I'll wrap up next. Great conversation with the General. Unfortunately, we're out of time, so your state of mind returns tomorrow. Frank Caprio does too. He's running for treasurer, and we'll talk about all things that. See you on the radio tomorrow at noon on WPRO. Have a great night. Good night.